So what did we see yesterday? We saw that he asked the question of why was the Torah given, first of all, in the Midbar, which really means the wilderness. And then the second question was, why wasn't it given on other mountains that were in Eretz Yisrael, like Tavo and Chilmon? He said that the root of all evil in the soul is that a person has grubkeit, gasut. But the most important thing is that he's making himself arrogant. He's feeling his arrogance in a uncouth manner, unrefined manner. And why does he say it like that? Because we said that not all arrogance is wrong. When a person has pride in Torah, in his people, in mitzvos, so those are positive aspects. They don't ruin the person. But even they can be detrimental if a person does them with gasut, with grubkeit. Grubkeit has a way of ruining even good things. Even if it's a good thing to be proud of your people, to be proud of your heritage, if it's done in an uncouth manner, in an unrefined manner, it itself can also be destructive. So now, he says the main point of the Torah really is that if you have shiflus, that if you have a feeling of nafshika afar lakol tiyeh, that my soul is here to serve everybody else, like the ground on which everybody walks, then you can come to Har Sinai, then you can receive the Torah. The Torah can only be received by somebody who doesn't feel his own being as here to serve himself. If he feels that he has being, but the being that I have is to serve other people, so that's okay. So then he came to the question, so this word shiflus becomes a very important word. It's not mentioned many times in Chabad, but this is one of the central maimarim that does talk about it. And shiflut really we usually translate as lowliness. So now we come to the second question. That's what we ended with yesterday. Of if you want to teach us to be lowly, so why don't you give the Torah in a valley? Why are you giving it in a mountain in the first place? Mm-hmm. Sorry?
Dead Sea.
In the Dead Sea, in the Grand Canyon.
Oh, Dead Sea is the lowest place in the world.
Yeah, but you don't feel it's so low because it's wider. In the Grand Canyon, you'd feel, look how far down you have to go. Mm-hmm. You'd see it.
Well, the Knesset.
Yeah, that's another place that would be very good to give the Torah. Regardless of... אבל העניין, כי באמת, אם היות שצריך כל אדם להיות שפל במאוד, מכל מקום צריך התחזקות וקצת הגבהה, כמו שכתוב, והגבה ליבו בדרכי השם. So then we talked about the fact that even a Talmud Chacham, every Talmud Chacham, needs an eighth of of pride, of arrogance. So he's teaching you that no, you have to have some amount of pride. And what is that? Without that, if you don't have any feeling of being high in any way, being above, then you won't do anything. A person will say, why would Hashem need me? He doesn't need me at all. We talked about the significance, the meaning that mitzvos have. That the main thing that they have is that they tell me that Hashem needs me as a person, as an individual. It's an incredible breakthrough when you think about what was running around in the world at the time that Moshe Rabbeinu taught the mitzvos, where the individual counted for nothing, and there was no meaning to be found in individuality, in being a separate being. You were part of an empire, you were either a slave or close to a slave, and there was nothing unique about you. You were like everybody else. So it's very difficult to even develop feelings of true, what we call individuality, independence. These things didn't exist back then. Comes Moshe Rabbeinu and says, you are no longer slaves to men. You don't need to serve a human being. That's not where you will get your justification for being from. That's not where you get your meaning from. rather from doing mitzvot, from the infinite. From Hashem who is beyond, and the mitzvot are always from the sovev, they're always from the surrounding light, which is Hashem's transcendent nature, not His immanent nature. So as a reflection of His transcendent nature, He comes and says, this is where you get your ultimate meaning from. This is where you get your ultimate justification for being from. The other option today, because there's no empires, or it's not as terrible as it was 150 years ago, so people, they put themselves in Hashem's place, and they say, I'll give myself meaning. But for most people, that goes bankrupt very quickly. Because man is not enough to rely on himself. You have to be so arrogant, so completely oblivious to your own ultimate demise, so oblivious to human pain and suffering. It's the only way you can put yourself in place of Hashem and say that I give myself meaning. I know who I am because I've developed my individuality. No, the individuality really can develop if it's surrounded, it's receiving from the surrounding light of Hashem that's allowing it to develop in a healthy way. And the healthier is that on the one hand, there's gavut lev, v'yigba libo b'derechei Hashem, like Yehoshaphat, that when it comes to the mitzvot, he feels, yes, a certain amount of pride and arrogance in his being chosen by Hashem to perform these mitzvot, and every human being has a possibility of performing mitzvot, all the more so a Jew. And on the other hand, he feels completely lowly. So he's Har Sinai. On the one hand, he's a Har. On the other hand, he's in the wilderness. Anybody can tread on him. Anybody can walk on him.
Sinai is in the wilderness?
Well, it was in the Bamidbar Sinai. There's three things there. There's a mountain, there's the wilderness, and there's a place called Sinai. So, sorry, it's in the wrong order. The order is wilderness, a mountain, and its name is Sinai. But both of them are called Sinai. Both the wilderness and the mountain are both called Sinai. So Sinai is also a description of the wilderness. The wilderness, we said, that's the lowly aspect. That it's the nafshi ke'afar lakol tiyah, that I'm like a wilderness to everybody. I don't belong to myself, as it were. Anybody can make use of me, in the sense that my purpose in the world is to help other people.
So the eighth of the eighth that the tzaddik has, could that be considered like the food for the neshama shel behema?
Okay.
Because otherwise it wouldn't move.
Yeah. It's allowing, the behema always eats. And we're letting an eighth of it show through. We're letting a certain amount show through. This whole thing of an eighth has a lot of explanations in Chassidus, which unfortunately I never remember. But I once saw a whole mimer on it. Just with different explanations of why the description is an eighth of an eighth. In any case, but rather the person's, here he doesn't use the word shiflut, he uses the word bitul, and he constantly switches between them. So to really understand this mimer, we're going to have to do a little bit of construction of terms, because there's a number of terms here that he's using, and they sound in the beginning synonymous, but they're not synonymous at all. They're two different aspects entirely of what it means to rectify the soul. So lowliness and selflessness are not the same thing. ובדיבור המתחיל חלצו מאיתכם לגבי עניין שלום בפרמליה של מעלה. No, I don't think that's what he means. I have to turn that down. Maybe it is the Chaltzu is a famous mimer that when people say chalzu, they mean chalzu tafresh nun tet. There's also a chalzu from the Alter Rebbe. Chalzu talks about the war with Midian, and that the Midian, what Midian represents in the soul, is what we call gratuitous hatred. That there's no reason that I hate somebody. I hate them just because they take up space. They bother me just for the very fact that they're here.
So it's gaiva.
So that it's attributed to my feeling of self. That my self expands, and it's as if there's somebody else
There's no
here,
room for it.
there's no room for somebody else. So it's like, how much does my being expand? So that's the war with Midian. That's what Midian represents in the psyche. So there it says that it's explained mitchem gabei inyan shalom b'pamalya shel mala shebanefesh moach v'lev. So he says that there are different ways in that mimer from the Alter Rebbe. He explains three different ways in which Hashem makes peace between two different sides. So he gives the example of two angels or two ministers. The king has two ministers or two angels. So he says that there are two levels at which the angels make peace between one another because of their connection to the king. Meaning that, let's say there's two ministers and one's chesed and one's gvura, one's loving kindness, the other one is justice and din and might. They don't get along normally, but when the king comes into the room, so they all stand before him. So now they're batil to him. That's called bittul. It's called bittul. What does bittul achieve? It seems to achieve that you're nullified before the king, but the question then becomes, if you're so nullified before the king, and because of that you get along, what happens when you leave his presence? So when you leave his presence, suddenly you go back to fighting each other. So that's not a very good strategy for achieving peace. Meaning, oseh shalom b'mromav, the fact that Hashem makes peace above, is not exactly the strategy we're looking for here. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu, that he'll make peace here. The peace here has got to be of a different quality. Why? Because Hashem is not present.
It doesn't require
we
him
don't
to
see
adjudicate.
we don't see Hashem the way that they see him above. The other option is that they say that above, Gabriel and Michael will sit together around the table because they have a common purpose. The king gives them a common purpose. They can't figure out a common purpose by themselves. But he tells them and he says, look, go build me so and so. And for that you need both this power and that power. And even though they're opposites, they complement when it comes to a common purpose. The same thing, we have the same problem down here. So with Torah, maybe it's a little bit more, maybe it's a little bit better. So we're looking for something entirely different. What is really the thing that makes people able to live in peace, and not just live in peace in the sense of get along, but to actually integrate and help one another? It's the ability to find the other in myself. That if I can recognize the other qualities in myself, then I connect even to somebody who's opposite from me. How is that possible? It's possible because even though we seem to be simple, meaning monolithic, like we're just one thing, I'm just a type who's very into loving kindness. I don't judge very well. I don't do it the right way, and so on. Still, I can understand what it is, because by nature of the infinite being in each one of us, there is an inter-inclusion, it's called, itkalalut, of the different forces under the main category heading that I have. Meaning my main category heading might be loving kindness, but underneath I also have might, and I also have beauty, and I also have everything else. So it's incumbent upon me to figure out how do I find other people in myself? Okay, that's called limud zchut. That's really to judge a person favorably, because you find him in yourself. And if you can find him in yourself, then you can begin to love him for even things that seem to be opposite between you, that there seem to be a contradiction between you. Because you found that very element inside yourself, even though in you it receives it has a different tone, different tonality, because your major attribute is something else. But because we're infinite beings, because there's something infinite in the soul, so there is a possibility of finding everybody else even inside of me. So that's really the basis of a connection between a husband and wife, that the husband has to find his wife in himself and connect with it, even the faults. Like if my wife is clumsy, and I'm absolutely not clumsy. Everything by me is very exact, and I never drop anything. Right? So I have to still find in myself that I might be clumsy in other things. Maybe I don't drop dishes and break them. But maybe when I'm given a list of things to do, some of them get dropped off. I do forget this. Meaning, maybe I don't pay attention in other places. Maybe I speak to people in a clumsy way. Like that I want to talk to them very nicely, and then suddenly I'm clumsy and the words don't come out the right way. It's another form of clumsiness. If I can find the same thing in myself, then the connection is at a much deeper level. And then it becomes peace even down here, where there's no presence, as it were, of Hashem. Obviously, this is all the presence of Hashem, but it's not the presence of Hashem the way that the angel would see it. So in any case, to do this, you need these two aspects called bittul and shiflus, to have nullification and lowliness. The lowliness is what allows you to see how other people are included in you. And this will need to develop a little bit more, because it's a little bit deeper. So he says that once you have this, now you can receive the Torah, because the whole purpose of Torah is to bring peace into the world.
But let's stick with the individuals for a minute. You figured out within yourself the thing that's irritating you within the other.
Okay, so you identify with it.
You've identified with him. How does that achieve peace?
Because you're not two warring parties now. You have the same issue. You're brothers in arms.
You could still be upset.
You can, but you have to ask yourself, how would I be upset at myself? I wouldn't, because I called shame to chasei ava.
So you forgive them as you would forgive yourself.
Okay, I see that it's the same issue. I have the same issue.
Okay, fine. Okay.
And not only that, the moment that a person has somebody else who understands them,
that's already enough.
That, to a large degree, is healing already. The main thing that sets people on a course of mental wellness is that they have a feeling that they're not alone. There's somebody with me. There's somebody who knows what I'm talking about. In fact, you can never help anybody if you don't understand what their problem is. So if you're not able to experience it yourself and solve it in yourself, or at least see how to handle it in yourself, how to contain it without breaking apart because of it, you can't help somebody else. The most intimate connections that we have always are with the people that understand us. It's an amazing thing that the irritability because of two people live in close quarters because they live together, and they're very irritated by one another's faults, leads them to a place where they can't even understand, they can't even begin to imagine that they might have the same thing, right, at some level. It's always, it's probably not as pronounced, because if it was as pronounced, you'd see it. But in some abstract way, it does exist inside of you. The same thing with love, with what the person loves, not just what's wrong with them. But let's say my wife, really loves clothing. My wife doesn't, but let's say she did. So is there nothing in this world that I feel particularly attached to? Maybe I'm so spiritual that I think that for me, clothing is books. So I go window shopping for books. I spend hours in a bookstore looking at all the different books. And then I buy way too much. So at some point I curbed it. I stopped it. When I was 25, I think I stopped it. But I understand it. I understand this nature. I understand where it comes from. And I also understand the feeling I stopped it because I realized that I was trying to fill a hole that couldn't be filled by books anyway. Yeah, I was trying to fill a need to be, in my case, let's say, I was trying to be recognized for my knowledge. But I wasn't really trying to gather knowledge. I was trying to gather recognition. Mm. And it turns out that knowledge is not enough to give you recognition. It'll never be enough. If you're looking for recognition, you'll always have a hole inside. Right. So you have to fill it in another way. You have to stop seeking the recognition, and then the particular vehicle, the particular way that you were trying to achieve it, like in my case, books, goes away. You don't need them anymore. You can spend all your life on one page. Because really the Torah is infinite. One page is enough. Anyway, so that needs to be studied in and of itself, because it's a different mimer. It's called Hechalzu. V'zeu Inyan v'yasfu anavim ba'avaya simcha. So how did he get something to simcha? He didn't mention simcha at all. He didn't say a word about simcha yet. So what's simcha got to do with it?
Through peace.
So the understanding here is that when a person has shiflus, he also has simcha. That's the simple understanding. If a person says, I'm here to be treaded upon, I'm here to serve others, and suddenly he receives a gift. We said that's when Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah. When he admitted that he himself could not study it and acquire it thanks to his own conduct, to his own prowess, to his own abilities. Every time he would learn the entire Torah and he would forget. It's not clear whether he made himself forget or he just forgot. But in any case, he emptied himself. He was empty. He found himself to be empty at the end. And after 40 days of learning everything and not being able to retain it, Hashem gave it to him as a gift. What's the idea of giving it as a gift? That now you really cannot say that it was my abilities that brought me to the Torah. It's not my ability, this is Hashem's Torah. And Hashem gave it to me. So when a person recognizes that about everything that he has in his life, meaning a lot of people, especially in a capitalistic system, so they have a feeling that I made myself. I worked hard, and I made myself. But they ignore the fact, because it's very easy to ignore and you don't want to really acknowledge it. Who gave you the ability to think? Who gave you the ability to work hard? Okay, granted, some people find it very hard to work hard. They're not very diligent. They're not very industrious. And they've worked on it. But even who gave you the health to work on it? Even if your health wasn't so good, you did have some health. Who gave you your breaths of life every single moment that you worked on this? So the person doesn't feel like this, but we've talked about this in the past, that the only thing that we control is what our mind thinks. The fact that our mind sends signals to the body and the body does, that's not within our sphere of abilities. Meaning this is something already that we have no control over. Some people, unfortunately, their mind thinks fine. It functions perfectly. They have all the good intentions in the world, but they suffer from some disease that the neurons don't carry the signals, and they can't walk, or they can't do what they would like to do. So the fact that I thought of these things and so on, that's all very good and fine. That is me. But the fact that it created a reality, it changed reality. My actions changed my reality. That already is a gift from Hashem. That I can have an influence on my life. So when a person realizes that everything he has is a gift, The Alter Rebbe says that this is the source of joy. Because people are sad, they're depressed, they're uncontent because they feel that they should get more. They feel that they should have more. How come I don't have this and how come I don't have that? But the moment that these things, everything that you have is a gift, and it's a matnat chinam, it was given to you gratuitously, without any of your own doing, then suddenly you realize how blessed you are. And that's the source of joy in life. That everything that I have is a blessing from Hashem. And even those things that don't seem to be so good, even the fact that I can deal with them, that I have to deal with them, is a blessing in some ways, because I have some kind of challenge that I have to work with. Some people don't even have challenges. They sit in an old age home. Nobody cares. Nobody knows. Nobody asks them anything. Nobody's interested in them. There's no challenges. The kids don't cause them problems anymore. Even to have a problem with a child is a blessing. Why? Because I have a child. To have a problem with my wife is a blessing, because I have a wife. I have a home. These are all blessings, even if they don't seem so great right now. So that becomes a source for joy, but he adds here now a new word that he hasn't. He said this in the pasuk. Inyan v'yasfu anavim v'avaya simcha. Until now, he used the word shiflus, that being lowly brings you to joy. Now in the pasuk, this is a pasuk from Mishlei. The idea here is that somebody who's humble increases joy in God, meaning increases his joy in being with Hashem. Humility and lowliness are not the same thing as that. They're a little bit different. The main difference between them is that humility is a conscious or an intellectual trait. That's how it's defined in Chassidus. Whereas lowliness is an existential trait. Okay? And they're different. Lowliness says that regardless of it, lowliness does not take into consideration other people. It just says, I'm like the wilderness. I have nothing of my own. It's not in relation to anybody else. It's just me, myself, and I. That's what when you say existential, that's pretty much what you mean. That even if I was sitting on a desert island, I could be lowly. Why am I lowly? Because I have nothing of my own. Everything that I have, God gave me. Even if I'm sitting on a desert island, all I have is a coconut tree. So Hashem gave me the coconut tree. It doesn't require other people. But humility, by definition, is an intellectual trait that a person acquires in relation to other people. Again, this is a Hasidic definition, how these two words are defined in Hasidus. So it says that by Moshe Rabbeinu, how do we know this? From the verses, it says about Moshe Rabbeinu in Parshas Shlach. In a couple of weeks we'll read it. It says, "Vayish Moshe hanav mikol ha'adam asher al pnei adama." That the man Moses was more humble than any person on the face of the earth. From that verse, we learn that humility is in relation to other people, and he was the most humble. Why? Because it was not a living soul that ever lived or ever will live that Moshe was not more humble than. So, what does it mean to be humble? To be humble means to recognize your good traits, to recognize your abilities, to recognize those things for which you need to thank Hashem that you have, and to say that I'm more humble than anybody else. How? Because if somebody else would have received these traits, these gifts, these abilities, they would have done more with them. So that's the definition of humility. So humility is always in relation to others. And it's an intellectual trait in the sense that I have to think it through. I have to really think it through. I can't just say I'm humble. Humble means I'm more humble than something. Or I'm humble in relation to something. It's not existential. It's not just me, I'm just humble. I can't be humble to myself. So I have to think about somebody else and say, well, Why do I scorn them? Because they don't have this and this trait. And I do. But if they would have received the same trait that God gave me, they would have done it. Because I know them. They're much more serious than I am. That's like a way of looking at it. Okay? So now he says lowliness and humility. How are they in Kabbalah? In Kabbalah, they're malchut and bina.
I'll be back in 5 minutes. I'll be back in 5 minutes.
The malchut and kingdom and understanding. Now we see why it's that way. Kingdom is malchus. It's described as it has nothing of its own, and malchus is a sense of self in the person. It's sort of like the I, in many ways. David says, "Va'ani tefillah." My I is all prayer. David, he's the symbol of kingdom. He's the soul of kingdom. Understanding is an intellectual sphira. It's already something. In the Torah, who are the two figures that are Malchus and Bina, meaning that they're lowly and humble?
David and Moshe.
No, Moshe Rabbeinu is either Netzach, or he's Da'at, or sometimes he's Chochmah. Those are the three main things it is. But Bina is not usually. Even though it says...
Liar is Bina.
Oh, exactly. So it gets... Even though, just to strengthen a little bit what you said, it says Moshe Zecha lebina, that even though he didn't have understanding, he was given understanding. That's how the sages say. In any case, so Leah is the example of humility. It's very interesting. Moshe also, because he was anav. So you have to say that he had something that had to do with Binah. After he received Binah, so he also had humility, meaning he took it to the farthest extreme. But the person who's naturally, and an example of humility, is Leah. Why Leah? What's Leah so... you might think that maybe she's not so rectified yet, but she's comparing herself all the time. She's looking. Why was she crying? Why was she sad all the time? Because she said, I'm not, as it were, worthy of being with Yaakov. And I certainly don't want, I'm not worthy from the other side, I'm too worthy of being with Esau. So she's always in a comparison. Rachel was very existential. When Yaakov saw her, he just fell in love with her right away. It's love at first sight. That's very existential. It has nothing to do with comparing to somebody else. It's just natural flow. It's just how things go. But Leah was overthinking it. And because she overthought it, and maybe not in the best way, so she ended up being afraid of this relationship she would have with Esau. In the end, Yaakov married her, but he made the mistake again that he didn't give Esau her daughter, Dinah. And the sages say that if they wouldn't have been so hung up on is our daughter worthy, is Esau worthy of marrying our daughter, she would have caused Esau to do tshuva, because Bina is also tshuva. Okay, there's a lot to be developed here. The point is that when you say lowliness and when you say humility, they're two different things. So what is he saying here? He's saying, on the one hand, lowliness is what gives you the Torah. Lowliness gives you bittul. Bittul is like the Torah. On the other hand, you have to get the humility also. What's the difference between them? So in the Sikha, that we actually learned this year, when we were in here, so we learned the Sikha from Bihar. That the Rebbe, Bihar means in the mountain, Har Sinai. There the Rebbe explains this mimer, and he says it's in if somebody wants to look at it, it's in Likutei Torah in part 1. It's on Parshas Bihar. There's only one. It's the beginning part of Bihar. And there he explains that really you need to move from lowliness to humility. You cannot stay in lowliness. Meaning, if you stay in lowliness is a feeling of being low without any good qualities. I have nothing of my own. Hashem never gave me anything. So at every moment I feel like He's giving me something at this moment, that's it, but I don't have anything. But you can't function that way. His argument is, if a person wants to function, they have to if you want to feel some joy, if you feel Hashem gave me this, and He gave me this, and He gave me eyesight now, and he gave me the ability to talk, and all these things are wonderful, and I feel so much gratitude and joy. But you can't function day to day at every moment if you keep feeling that I don't have anything of my own, nothing's natural, nothing's mine, it's all being given to me at this moment, I could lose it at this moment also.
It's debilitating.
It hinders you, it stops you. So at some point you have to accept, this is what Hashem gave me. You're right, He could change it tomorrow. But right now, this is what He gave me. So how do I not fall into a state of being arrogant? It's called humility. That I say, it's true that I have all these gifts and all these things, all these abilities that I have. For instance, I see somebody blind on the street. And I say, I'm certain that if he had eyesight, he wouldn't do all the negative things I do with my eyesight. I have this gift called eyesight. But I know that I do with it things that I look in places I shouldn't look, and I see things I shouldn't see, and so on. And I'm certain that if Hashem would have given this gift to this person, he would not do these things.
Right.
So I'm humble, even though I can see he can't. So I'm humble before him. I feel that he's a greater person than I am. Another thing, Hashem gave me a family where I grew up that there was emunah, there was Torah, there was all these things. Now I see somebody who doesn't have these things. He didn't grow up then. And I know that if Hashem would have given him those things, to have a background in Yiddishkeit and in Torah and in emunah, he would be a much greater person than I am now. I received these things for free, gratuitously, but I haven't done with them as much as somebody else would have done. This saves me from arrogance that's not in its place. Mm-hmm. And you have to move from lowliness to humility. Because if you stick to lowliness, in the end, you can't function. You become somebody who's just always in a feeling of I can't do anything because I really don't have anything.
So really, you gain potence
Okay.
by moving.
Right. And this is a very important principle in Kabbalah in general, that until you move to the intellectual aspect, you're not potent. You don't have life force. It's not enough to be in Malchus. Malchus is very good and it's important, but you have to also be able to raise yourself, to intellectualize, to think about something like lowliness. The more you begin to think about it, it becomes humility. It becomes in relation to other people. And that gives life force to what you do.
Really, in development of spheres as well. By the time you reach Malchus, you're ready to start again.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
So then we'll stop. Right?
Yeah. Can I just ask you a question?